Hello and welcome to a new Oxygen XML webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is George Bina and I will be your host today. I invited my colleague Stephen Higgs to present you our newest product, Oxygen Content Fusion, a collaboration platform allowing you to easily collaborate with others on XML content. Before we start, I want to provide a few answers to the usual questions that we receive. Is the webinar recorded? Yes, this webinar will be recorded and the recording will be available from the event page, the page where you registered for the webinar, and also on our Oxygen XML YouTube channel. You will also receive a notification email with the link to the recording. How and when can you ask questions? You can ask questions using the questions panel in the webinar interface, or you may also use Twitter and mark your questions with the Oxygen XML hashtag or address them to the Oxygen XML account, and we will monitor that as well. So along with Stephen and me, there are also a few of our colleagues from the Content Fusion development team that will be able to answer your questions as we go. At the end of the webinar, we have a dedicated question and answers section where we'll go through the questions that were asked during the webinar, and also you can ask also questions, other questions at that time. Without further ado, let me give control to, let me make Stephen presenter so he can show you. Hi, Stephen.
Hello, thank you, George. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So in this webinar, I will be showing you an in-depth demonstration of our new collaboration product called Oxygen Content Fusion. I'm a technical writer like many of you, and I can tell you that I use this tool a lot. Basically, anytime I need documentation reviewed or content approved before publishing, Content Fusion is the tool I use, and you'll see why. For a content author, I can't imagine a better way to collaborate with others unless the person happens to be at your desk working directly with you. So our agenda today. First, I'll introduce Content Fusion by telling you the story of how it materialized. Then I'll show you how to use it from a content author's perspective. Then I'll switch to the role of a reviewer to show you Content Fusion from their perspective. And finally, I'll offer details about using your own server and even show you some examples of possible ways to customize it to suit your specific needs. So first, an introduction, and really the purpose of this story is to offer some context, and I'm sure many of you will relate to the challenges that we face when it comes to team collaboration. So hopefully this will give you an idea of and how this product can help your team. So the concept of Content Fusion evolved over the course of several years as George and others gathered feedback from customers and people within the XML community in regards to various collaboration challenges and needs. And of course, our whole world has become more and more reliant on mobile and online technologies, and the XML community has followed suit. So the need for an online version of Oxygen led to the development of Oxygen XML WebAuthor, and this opened up a plethora of possibilities for addressing collaboration challenges. In case you haven't seen it, this is what WebAuthor looks like. And you can see that it's very similar to Oxygen XML Editor or Author, but it has a simplified and modern interface, and of course it's accessible from a browser. Well, at some point we began analyzing our own internal documentation process to try to identify how we can improve the collaboration part. And this is a chart that shows kind of what our documentation flow looks like. We use Jira for our issue tracking and project management. And in most cases, the documentation tasks originate from there. So whether the need for documentation comes from feedback from an end user or the support team or quality assurance team or a request from management, or maybe a developer will add an improvement or a new feature that needs to be documented. In all cases, a Jira ticket is created and the process starts from there. And the need for collaboration is possible in many of these phases. But we kind of narrowed it down to basically 3 major scenarios where most of our collaboration possibilities happened. And those were the proofreading phase. Either the quality assurance team or developers are proofreading documentation that has been created or updated. Second is the support team or somebody notices a problem in the published output. And the third is during the content creation phase, the documentation team needs to send content to a developer or subject matter expert to request additional content or get feedback, more information, etc. So these were the areas that we really wanted to focus on to improve our process. And I won't go into much detail on the first 2 because they don't have anything to do with Content Fusion, but I'll show you what we did really quickly. So for the proofreading phase, we integrated WebAuthor and our Git repository with Jira. And so anytime a commit is made that references the Jira ticket number, it adds a link directly in that Jira ticket, and clicking that link will open the source document in WebAuthor. And so the proofreader can add comments, make changes directly in the source, and then I see it as a commit in our repository system. And the second case is similar. This is where, let's say, a support person notices a problem in the output. We integrated WebAuthor with our web help and PDF output, and so there's this edit online link. They can click that, and again, just like in the first case, it opens WebAuthor, opens the source document directly in WebAuthor, and they can make the change directly in the source, precisely at the location of the problem, and then I see it as a commit. So we managed to make the collaboration process very efficient when it involved collaboration between the documentation team and someone proofreading or making small changes to the content. But the third area is where we face the biggest challenges, and this is when the documentation team needs to collaborate with a developer or subject matter expert, and this is during the content creation stages. And this usually goes well beyond simple corrections or reviewing like in the other scenarios. What we're talking about here is a very fluid process where, for example, the author creates new content and they need to send files to someone because they have questions, or they need them to review something, or they need them to add something to the content, such as code snippets. And of course, in this type of scenario, the collaboration process could end up going back and forth between the parties involved numerous times, and maybe more people will end up getting involved. So we needed a more complex solution for this. So we identified some major challenges in our process. And these were, first, most subject experts didn't have access to the current documentation project, so the documents or fragments had to be sent back and forth in some manner, and the process was very tedious. And sending fragments often led to confusion since they couldn't see the whole context. We also found that if it's difficult for them to access the documents, they are less likely to provide good feedback. And also in some cases, they were in different locations or worked different hours, so this tended to slow down the process. Now, of course, every company has their own set of challenges and their own workflow, and we didn't just want to create a tool to only solve our challenges, but we also wanted to address challenges that our customers and other organizations face. For example, Since we develop Oxygen, we have the advantage of all of our contributors being very familiar with XML and Oxygen, of course. But this is not the case with other companies. The subject matter experts may not be at all familiar with XML or the applications the content authors use. So to address not only our challenges, but a wide range of challenges that everybody faces, we really needed a comprehensive and dynamic solution that would be very simple to use, but also flexible and powerful to accommodate virtually any workflow. So these were our solution goals that we wanted to accomplish so that this new product could be viable and a valuable tool. First, we needed it to provide an efficient way for documents to be passed back and forth regardless of where the contributor is located. Second, we needed to provide an easily accessible tool where reviewers can view and edit the source documents without needing access to the project. Third, we needed to provide an intuitive way for collaborators to communicate throughout the process. Fourth, we needed to make the process incremental to avoid file editing conflicts and notify the documentation team when the process progresses to a new stage. Fifth, we needed to enable the documentation team to automatically merge the changes back into their original project. And finally, we wanted to provide a server solution so that users can control their own configuration, their own data, and have the ability to use custom frameworks and other customizations. And this led to Content Fusion. So that's the backstory. And now I'll let you see it in action, and you'll see how we addressed a lot of those solution goals, or all of them actually. So as the content author, the first thing that I need to do is install an add-on. And this basically allows Oxygen to connect to the Content Fusion server. So I'll go to Help, Install New Add-ons. And for simplicity, I'll just select all available sites. And it's this one, the Oxygen Content Fusion connector. I just follow the instructions. And I have to restart the application. And now you see I have access to this new toolbar button, and clicking that button opens Content Fusion Task Manager. And since this is the first time using it, I need to specify the server address. Now this first public option is just for demo purposes. You can use it to try Content Fusion on a trial basis to see that it works for you. But documentation teams in a production environment are obviously going to want to use the enterprise solution. In my case, the server admin has sent me the address to the server, and I'm going to intentionally add a port just to show you. I shouldn't add the port, but it will detect that there's a legitimate address because it tests the connection and asks me if I want to use that one instead of what I entered, and of course I do. And this opens Content Fusion in my browser. Now, if this was the first time accessing it, I would need to sign up and confirm my email address. I've already done that, so I'll just log in. And I need to authorize it. And then back in Oxygen, you see that it populated the Task Manager view. Shows that I'm logged in. If I click this drop down, there's a few options. If I click Go to My Account, it'll open my account in the browser. Connection status just shows some details such as the server address, version, and other information. This first box is where you create new tasks, attach documents to it, and you see that I have a bunch of tasks already created. And there's several ways to attach documents, and I'll show you all of them. If you just want to send the current document that you're editing, you can right-click anywhere in the editing pane and select this first option, add file to review task. And then I would give it a name. Notice that I usually use the JIRA ticket number to keep track, but you can use whatever name you like. And in this case, I'm going to use names that are relevant for this webinar, so that I can keep track of the tasks I create. The next method is from the project view. You can drag documents. You can also drag files from your System File Explorer. And I'm actually going to create a couple. Now this particular file, it's an XML file. Actually, I'll show it to you. It has a CSS file attached directly to the document or referenced straight from the document, and has a couple images. But in this case, I've attached it without those files. And then I'll also create a task where I attach all of the referenced resources as well, and then you'll see the difference in Content Fusion. And then the other way to attach files, and this is the method that I usually use. If you're using a DITA project, from the DITA Maps Manager, you can also drag files from there. And the advantage of this is you'll notice that the context DITA map option is automatically populated. It detects the root map from the map that you dragged the files from. And the advantage of this is attaching a context map means that all the references and keys and whatnot will be expanded properly in Content Fusion. So the reviewers will be able to see the full context. They'll see the references and keys expanded. Otherwise, it would just show a warning that there's content that can't be shown. So I've created some tasks, and if I right click on any of the task boxes, have some options. The most important one is copy task link. This copies the link that was generated for this task to your system clipboard, and then I can send that link to anyone I want to review the documents. I can also delete the task, but I can also do that directly from the box. When I'm done with the task and I've merged the changes back into the content, I usually like to delete the task so that I keep my view organized. If I click on the task name, the description that I entered, it will open the task in my browser. This is the task details screen. And as the content author, I have some options here that the reviewer will not have. The share button is another way to retrieve the link to the task. And in this case, you can actually see the link. You can use this button to copy it to your clipboard. This assign button is helpful if, for example, the content author is going on vacation and they're leaving their work with a colleague. Maybe you have ongoing tasks that colleague will continue working on. So in this screen, you can assign the task to another user. From the More menu, you have the option to download the task or delete it. In the Settings tab, there's an option to force change tracking to always be on. I always keep this on because I want to see what was changed. And if I click on my name over here on the right-hand side, I can view my profile, and there's some options here. These bottom ones, I can specify what type of email notifications I'll receive. So I can specify to receive an email anytime a new message is added on a task that is assigned to me, or any new message is added on a task that was created by me, or any task that is finalized by a reviewer, or this last one is whenever a reviewer is assigned to a task that was created by me. Basically, this is or when the reviewer clicks on the link that I send them and they access the documents in Content Fusion. It would notify me that they actually navigated to the documents. If I click on my tasks, it'll show me all the tasks that were assigned to me, and these are tasks that somebody else created and sent to me for review. And then this next section is the tasks owned by me. These are all the ones that I created, and this list is going to match all of those tasks in Oxygen in the Task Manager view. So now let's look at some documents. Remember, I attached a file without the resources that are referenced. So this is what the document looks like with the CSS and images. And if I go to that task where I only attached the file, and I click the file, this opens it in the editor, and you'll see that it doesn't have the background color and the images aren't shown. Now, if I open the one where I also attached the CSS file and images, notice that it still only shows the one XML file here. That's because Content Fusion detects the file extension, and some file extensions, obviously XML files, are editable in the editor, and other files such as image file extensions and CSS files are considered resources that are referenced in the XML files. So it doesn't show them here, but they are attached. So if I open this document, since the files were attached, you see that it has the yellow background and shows the referenced images. Wait, now I'm going to log out because I actually want to show you the editor from the perspective of a reviewer. So I've created a reviewer account for a reviewer named John Doe. And remember, I created a task that I added a few files from the Data Maps Manager. This is one of those files that I attached. And I'm going to copy the task link. And I would send that link to John Doe. And all they would need to do is paste the link in their browser. Again, if this was their first time using Content Fusion, they would need to sign up, but I already created the account. See, I'm logged in as John Doe. I have the same options from here as the content author, but you'll notice that they don't have all the options in the task details screen. They do have a finalize review button that the content author doesn't have, and I'll explain that in a minute. So they see all the files that were attached here. They can click on any one of them because all the files are also listed over here on the left, so they can go through them one at a time and review them. In the editor, there's various options for making changes. You see that a lot of the toolbar buttons are similar to Oxygen. And you'll notice as I'm making changes, because I forced track changes to be on, you can see everything that is changed. I can also add comments. And over on the left-hand side, you'll see that we also have a message mechanism there. I can add messages here, and anyone who has access to this task and the content author can see the messages. And this is a very common scenario. So in this case, I want to send this task to another colleague so that they can review the videos. So all I need to do as John Doe is copy the link from the address bar, and I'm going to send this to my colleague, Bogdan, but it's very important that I first navigate back to the task detail screen or close the browser, because while I was in the editor, the file is locked. Remember, I explained that we wanted the process to be incremental to avoid file conflict problems. And you'll see that there's a red lock now on this file. That means that Bogdan has accessed it, and now he has the file locked. Only one person can edit a file at a time. And the file will be released as soon as he navigates back to the task detail screen or closes the browser. And the file lock is also released if you remain inactive for too long. And if nobody accesses the task in the meantime, you can also, when you pick up editing, you can click a button to start editing again. But in all cases, only one person can be editing the file at a time. And that is to avoid conflicts. And you'll notice that you can also see any messages that were added in this screen, and it's in real time, as well as in the editor panel. And I can see that he added a message. I can mark it as done. And the final thing that the reviewer needs to do is finalize the review. This button basically notifies the content author that they're finished reviewing all documents. And optionally, you can also add a message here with more details. Now back in Oxygen, you'll notice that I see that I have notifications, that I have new messages. If I click this, it'll just open the task in the browser. I can read the messages. It also notifies me that I have a file change. And this also gives me access to this Get Changes action. And this opens our merge tool. And this is based on our file comparison tool. And you have various options here. Even in the preview panel, you can, for example, decide to just keep some of the changes and reject others. But in 99% of the cases, I just select or leave it on automatically merge and click apply. And this will merge all of their changes back into my original document. So that's how simple and convenient it is. As I mentioned, I use it on a daily basis, and not only has it made the collaboration process much more efficient, but it has improved the quality of our documentation because I get better and more precise feedback. So now I want to go into some more detail about the enterprise server solution. The benefits of this are you control where your content is stored. You control your own server configuration and settings. You can control the data security and access to the server. You can use your own custom frameworks, and you have endless customization possibilities. In our Content Fusion user guide, there's a whole server administration guide that offers all the details that a server admin is going to need. Here's three options. Let me go back and explain these more. You have three deployment options. You can use your own server using VMware vSphere Virtual Manager. You can use a server hosted on Amazon Web Services, or you can use other virtualization platforms using an installation kit that is built to run on Ubuntu. So back to the server administration guide. All three of the deployment options are very similar in terms of the instructions, and this is going to be very simple for any server admin. Once they get to this point, basically they're just sending the server address to the content author so that they can specify it in Oxygen. But this last section gives them instructions of how to create a properties file that actually imposes the server address, and then the content author doesn't need to specify it manually. This is also preferable for companies that may change the server address and don't want to provide access to the content authors. They just want the server admin to monitor this and maintain it. Now, once the server is deployed, the server admin has access to this administration page. And there's various options here. For example, you can configure a mail server or use LDAP authentication. This tab allows the server admin to enable maintenance mode, and then nobody can access the server while it's being maintained. They can even configure a message to show while they're in maintenance mode. They can configure backup databases and access logs in case there's issues. This web author tab has an action that takes you to the web author administration page, and here there's some more options, and this is to configure the editor that is integrated in Content Fusion. You can install plugins to enhance the functionality, and remember I said one of the benefits of using your own server is you can use custom frameworks, and this is where you would upload the frameworks. And let me show you some examples of custom frameworks. First, I'm going to show you a few in WebAuthor, and keep in mind that any custom framework that can be uploaded in WebAuthor can also be uploaded Content Fusion. This is a very simple one where it has this inline action, and clicking it expands some more options. I can insert a new topic ref, has some file browsing buttons. Let me show you a more complicated one. This is from a custom lightweight DITA framework, and it has some inline actions. I can click this to insert a short description. If I don't know what to enter here, I can click this blue information button, and it gives the author hints as to what type of information should go at that specific location. Some inline actions. Maybe I want to insert a list or insert a table. And again, in all these cases, it has this blue button that offers inline hints. Now the custom frameworks are configured in Oxygen. And here's an extension of that lightweight DITA framework that I just showed you. And there's all sorts of options here, but I just want to show you that. So the components that you just saw, the inline actions and placeholders and authoring hints, those are all basically defined in a couple CSS files. I won't go into detail on how to create custom frameworks, but it just so happens that one of my colleagues will be hosting a webinar on November 7th that will teach you just that, how to create custom frameworks. Once you've created a framework in Oxygen, the only additional steps for WebAuthor or Content Fusion is that you need to zip the whole package into an archive and then upload the archive in Content Fusion or WebAuthor. For example, here's that lightweight DITA framework. It's already uploaded here for Content Fusion. And I don't know if you noticed this, but I had this lightweight data topic already opened here, and I created a task for it. So I'll click on it just to show you that in Content Fusion, you have exactly the same components as you saw in WebAuthor. Now we also created a custom framework specifically for this webinar, and it was inspired by an actual real world use case, an actual request. So basically they wanted to control what type of content can be edited. They only wanted the reviewer to be able to edit within certain elements and attributes. So here's an example. I have this document, and suppose that I'm a documentation team and I create various topics like this. And at the bottom, I have an example, but I don't know what the code snippet should look like. I don't know what this actual code would be. So I want to send this to an engineer or somebody, and I want them to be able to add the code snippet in the code block, and I want them to be able to specify what language the attribute or the output class attribute would be for this code block, but I don't want them to be able to edit any other part of the document. So I first need to upload the framework. You can see that it's already in an archive. I need to restart the server. And while that's happening, I'll create a task. To upload it, and I'll copy the link, and it is there. This is my custom framework, and I'm still logged in as John Doe, so I'll paste the link, and in Content Fusion you'll see that I can't edit anywhere except for I have this action to choose the language for my code block, for the output class for that code block, and I can enter the code snippet in the code block. And then back in Oxygen, I'll bird. I'll accept the track changes, and voila. So these were just a few examples of how Content Fusion can be customized to suit specific needs, but the customization possibilities are virtually limitless. So it was a pleasure to demonstrate Oxygen Content Fusion today. I hope all of you are as excited about it as I was when I first started using it. It really has made my life a lot easier. It's made my collaboration process much more efficient and even improved the quality of documentation. I already mentioned that there will be a webinar about creating custom frameworks on November 7th, but here is a full list of all of our upcoming webinars. In just a few weeks, a colleague will demonstrate how to create expect unit tests. A few weeks after that, you can learn how to create custom publishing templates for database, web help, and PDF output, and so on. And now I'll send controls back to George, and he'll answer some questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, so we received a few questions. Feel free to ask additional questions as we go. Let's go through some of the questions then. Can I assign a task when creating it, or delegate it, or whatever you call it? So basically, there are two actions that you can do with a task. One is to share the task with somebody, with someone that will be able to suggest changes or change the content of the files associated with that task. And you can do that using the share button to obtain a link to the task, and then use whatever, an email or a chat like Slack or something to send that URL. And what Steven presented actually is a new functionality where you can have somebody else as a owner, as an other owner of the task. So that's that person will be able to control the task and integrate the task into the original content. Okay, so another question. Is it possible to integrate Fusion with Subversion, or is it better to work with Git? Another similar questions. Can it be connected to pull content from an existing Bitbucket repository? Does it perform a clone or commit back to that repository? And the answer is that basically the repository does not connect directly to Fusion. Basically, you can use the desktop version of Oxygen to access the content from a repository. That repository can be anything, like Git or Subversion or even a WebDAV or a CMS. Once you have the content available in the desktop version of Oxygen, then you can create a task that basically sends a snapshot of that content to the Content Fusion server. And the people that you collaborate with will change that snapshot, not directly the content on the repository. You retrieve the changes from that snapshot using the get changes action back into your desktop version of Oxygen, similar to how you have modified the files directly in Oxygen. And then you can commit or continue your normal processing. So you'll be able to commit the changes or maybe on a different branch and so on. Now, Content Fusion also provides an API, and the plugin that we have for Oxygen Desktop is one of the possible clients for Content Fusion. So one can imagine a Content Fusion client that will listen for commit actions on a repository, will identify the modified files, and it will create a task automatically with those modified files. And then maybe when a finalized review message is read on that task, that client will automatically integrate the changes maybe on a new branch or creating maybe a pull request with those changes, so then someone can approve those and bring those changes back into that Git repository. But that is not an existing client, it's a potential possible client. Okay, so I hope I clarified that as well. Is the AWS solution a private cloud? Is our content guaranteed to be secure to only our users? So basically, we provide an Amazon machine image that can be deployed on AWS, and Amazon offers also a virtual private cloud. So you can either create or get a virtual machine on the Amazon cloud, or you may opt for a virtual private cloud, and then you can have even more control on the access to that machines or and so on, network configuration and so on. But the Content Fusion can be installed on any machine, so you can get that installed also on a physical machine in your local network if you want. Can you explain the enterprise server that you host? So we provide an installation kit for the enterprise version, and what we host is a demo server, so you can immediately try Content Fusion without any server installation. So basically you can just get the Content Fusion plugin as Stephen showed at the beginning of the webinar, and after that you can connect to the demo server fusion.oxygenxml.com, and you are ready to create your first Content Fusion task and share the link with the people that will be able to access that and so on, then integrate the changes so you can quickly immediately test and see how that works for you. Does the file stay locked until all reviewers are done reviewing and the original author has not yet committed the final version? So what is locked again is the snapshot of the content stored by Content Fusion, and the files are locked only when someone will access that file. So we just want to reduce or avoid multiple merge operations. We want to have a single version of the content on Content Fusion. So that snapshot that is uploaded to Content Fusion has only one version, because the content cannot be modified by two users in the same time. If one user will change a file, will edit a file, the file will be locked for the others. So then when the author will perform get changes action in the desktop version, they receive only one modified remote version. So the file will be locked not on the original repository. Only the snapshot from Content Fusion will be locked for the time a reviewer will access that file, or in fact anyone who will, even the author, if the author accesses that file, the file will be locked for the reviewers. And the moment when the author will commit, let's say to the actual repository, depends, it's controlled by the author. When he is happy with all the changes or feedback received from reviewers, he will say get changes, bring those changes back into his working copy in the desktop version of Oxygen, maybe perform additional edits on that, accept, for instance, or reject some of the proposed changes from reviewers, and then commit to the repository. If we have our own data specialization, do we have to set up our own enterprise server, or can we use the default Fusion setup? Well, I guess it may be possible to use also the default Fusion setup, but it will be a lot easier with an enterprise version. Why? Because you can have the data framework updated with your data specializations. So your data specialized file will be automatically recognized by Content Fusion. Otherwise, you need to upload also the DTDs together with the content on Fusion, so that Fusion will be able to find the DTDs that you are using, the specialized DTDs or schemas, maybe relaxing schemas or whatever you are using for your specialization. And that is a bit more difficult because DITA usually uses a catalog to resolve those references. So it's things are a lot easier if you use an enterprise server. That will work in the similar way as Stephen presented. So you don't need, the authors do not need to do anything different than using normal data, let's say without specialization, the standard data. Does a file that is being reviewed get committed automatically when each reviewer is done with it, or does it commit only after the author does a manual commit? So again, the workflow is that you have the repository where you can commit or check out and commit content from, to and from. You check out the content and you open that, you have access to that working copy in the desktop version of Oxygen. What you send to Content Fusion is a snapshot of the content from the working copy. And the reviewers will change that snapshot of the content. And with the get changes action, you get those changes back into the working copy. And then as the author, you can commit those changes to the actual repository. So only the author will commit the changes with a manual commit. Content Fusion provides just access to a snapshot of the content. Is there some predefined client for Subversion? If not, how difficult would it be to do this? Now, I guess that's not about a Subversion client in the way of accessing a Subversion repository, because Oxygen includes such a client. I guess the question is more about integrate directly from Subversion to Fusion in the way that I described earlier. So there's no such a client that integrates directly between Subversion and Content Fusion. As I mentioned earlier, someone can imagine that you can have a script that will listen for commit messages, for commit actions on the repository, identify the change files, create a task automatically, and then identify when that task is done, let's say, and bring those changes back into as committing on a new branch or something like that on the repository. If we use enterprise version, can we use our own data constraints? Yes, you can. Basically, the support that we have for data is not hard-coded to Oxygen Desktop or Oxygen Content Fusion. It's just a ready-to-use support for an XML language, and you can provide similar support for any XML language. As Stephen mentioned, we plan a number of upcoming webinars, and one of them, creating Oxygen frameworks on November 7, addresses exactly this this topic. The fact that the data support, the dogbook support, the TI, the XHTML support that you find in Oxygen is created through these Oxygen frameworks. And these are default frameworks that we provide, but the same level of support can be created for any XML language. And the enterprise version of Content Fusion allow you to control what frameworks are available on that Content Fusion installation. So basically, if you have a constraint data, then you can have on that enterprise version a deployment with the data framework that handles those constraints, so they are automatically available to when you upload the constraint topic, it will be recognized as data, and Oxygen Content Fusion will provide all the needed support for that. Fusion has only one license, a subscription. When you say enterprise server, do you mean that Oxygen editor needs to be of the enterprise version? No, no. When we say enterprise version, we mean the Content Fusion that we install on a server your own. So you own that server, as opposed to the demo server that we have available for everyone to test. Maybe in the future we will be able to offer a subscription for such a public server like the demo server that we have now. Right now, the access on the demo server is basically without any cost, but we do not make, let's say, any commitment to that about its availability or anything like that. So, and you cannot control what frameworks are available on that. So you do not need the enterprise version edition of the Oxygen editor. Content Fusion works with the professional and also with the academic editions, sorry, of the Oxygen XML editor. And Content Fusion Enterprise means that you download Content Fusion and you have an installed version of Content Fusion and not the public one, the demo server that we provide. And the Content Fusion is available, as you mentioned, as a subscription under a number of subscription packages for floating licenses, which allow basically anyone to access Fusion. Are Oxygen plugins portable to Content Fusion? Some Oxygen plugins, depending on the plugin type, may work with Content Fusion, because Content Fusion is built using the Oxygen Web Author as the editing component. So some of the Oxygen plugins can be used with the Web Author that is part of Content Fusion. So there may be some plugins that do like smart paste behavior, for instance, that do not provide a graphical user interface, and those Oxygen plugins work with the Oxygen Web Author, and they will work with the Web Author, which is part of the Content Fusion. Schematrons developed in the desktop version, they be implemented in Fusion? Yes, because Fusion is using the Oxygen Web Author as the editor, and the Oxygen Web Author is built on top of the core functionality that we have in the Oxygen desktop. The same validation support is available in Web Author and Content Fusion, including Schematron, RelaxNG, XML Schema, DTD, NVDL, so all the schema languages, and including Schematron Quiffix support. So all the functionality that all the validation functionality that you have in the desktop version is available also as part of Content Fusion. You should mention the Data OT Day also. Yes, we are happy to. I see that we missed that from the upcoming conferences. Sorry about that. Let me bring in maybe a browser window. oxygenxml.com. So we are happy to organize this year this event for the Data Open Toolkit called Data Open Toolkit Day, which is a free event. So there is no cost to attend. It is organized in connection to Data Europe, just the day before Data Europe and at the same location as Data Europe. So you can register and attend for free. We provide also lunch and coffee breaks and all that, and a very interesting agenda with a lot of interesting sessions. You can, if you scroll down this page, you can see also the previous editions, and here you can also see the video recordings for the previous sessions, just to if you want to get an idea of how this event, the feeling of what the presentations look like. We have the main Data Open Toolkit developers, Jarno Elovirta and Robert Andersen, attending this and presenting. So it's a great event to attend. So if you can join us, you are welcome to meet the developers and other users of the Data Open Toolkit in Rotterdam in November. Okay, so we are, I think, just about 5 minutes after the hour. There are no more questions. So thank you again, Stephen, for presenting, and thanks for joining us and for asking so many interesting questions. And hope to see you further, either at one of the upcoming events in person or virtually at one of our upcoming webinars. And you see there are a lot of them this year. So hope you will find some interesting topics here. So thank you and have a nice day.